Your CEO just rejected your proposal in 30 seconds. You prepared for 2 weeks. You had the data, you had the slides, and the moment you started talking, you watched his attention leave the room. That wasn't bad luck. That was a structural mismatch. You ran a social playbook on someone who operates on an entirely different architecture. Steve Jobs had that architecture, and the people who consistently got through to him knew something most people never figured out. Jobs was not a difficult personality. He was a predictable one once you understood his operating system. Most people see his volatility, the public humiliations, the employees fired in elevators, and they conclude he was ego-driven. Fragile, defending his identity, but the opposite is true. Jobs explicitly said, "I don't care about being right, I just care about success." That is not a fragile man defending his identity. That is someone whose entire cognitive system is organized around one thing. Does the product achieve the vision or not? Everything else is noise. That is Steve Jobs' bedrock, and everything else follows from it. The morphology confirms this and adds one critical layer. The face is long, bony, and sharply angular, correlating with rigid systematization, someone who builds tight internal hierarchies and defends them. The eyes are deep set with visible white below the iris in his later photos. Deep set eyes correlate with high calculation and social withdrawal. Not warmth, not openness, but rather penetrating assessment. The pronounced lateralization, the difference between the left and right sides of his face, is significant. The public-facing side is angular, severe, lifted. The core side shows exhaustion and fragility. He was projecting impenetrable certainty over a high degree of internal friction. The tyrannical exterior was a filtration mechanism, not a personality trait. Here is where it gets useful. Jobs' decision-making was primarily oriented toward external impact, what the product does to the world, not toward internal satisfaction or personal validation. This contradicts the morphology. The retracted, deep-set facial structure suggests someone who protects their own ego intensely, but the behavioral record overrides it consistently. He scrapped his own ideas the moment better data emerged. He invited vicious, internal debate. He described his best teams as rocks in a tumbler, grinding against each other until everything weak was removed. What looks like tyranny is actually a quality control protocol. He was also operating from a strong, intuitive processing baseline. He didn't think in data points. He thought in metaphors, computers as bicycles for the mind, product development as geological sedimentation. He skipped the proof and went straight to the meaning. And his delivery was masculine, blunt, non-negotiable, zero linguistic cushioning. He stated conclusions. He didn't present options. This combination produces a very specific behavioral profile. Someone who moves fast, thinks in systems, demands external results over internal comfort, and uses social friction as a stress testing tool rather than a threat. The standard approach fails completely with this architecture. Most people, when pitching to someone like Jobs, lead with data spreadsheets, slide decks, or logistical proof. The moment you open the spreadsheet, Jobs mentally exits the conversation. You can literally watch it happen. Eye contact breaks, impatience rises, interruptions start, not because he didn't value evidence, but because his brain processes concepts first and mechanics second. Forcing him through micro details before he's bought the macro vision creates exactly the sensation he fears most, being trapped in logistical chaos with no visible trajectory out. The second failure is social cushioning. Phrases such as, "I feel like this could be a strong direction," "the team thinks we should consider," or "maybe we could explore this." Every softened phrase signals one thing to the Steve Jobs archetype. You don't actually believe what you're saying. And if you don't believe it, why should he? In fact, the more socially correct you become, the less they trust you. The third failure is the one nobody sees coming. When he attacks your proposal, and he will, the instinct is to defend your reasoning, explain why you made the choices you made, justify the process. And that's the wrong move. He doesn't care why you made the decision. He cares whether the decision was right. The moment you defend your past thinking instead of pivoting to the correction, he categorizes you as someone whose ego is more important than the outcome. That's a terminal failure that you don't recover from. What I just described is pattern recognition, but the person across from the negotiating table is not a clean archetype. They're a specific individual whose combination of structural fears and behavioral history produces a fingerprint no four-quadrant model fully captures. If you want that level of precision on someone in your life, the link is in the description. Start with the free brief, 4 archetypes, no cost, and immediate delivery. Here's the asymmetric play for dealing with a Steve Jobs in your life. Before you pitch anything, attack your own proposal first. Identify the most obvious flaw in what you're about to present and name it before he can. This sounds counterintuitive, but it works. Jobs' entire processing system was organized around hunting for weaknesses. If you find it first, you've demonstrated that you operate at his standard of critical ruthlessness. His filtration mechanism disarms because you have already passed the first test. Second, deliver the core proposition as a historical inevitability, not an idea. Don't say, I think this is a strong direction. Say, this is the only logical conclusion of where the technology is heading. The question is whether we're the ones who get there first. That framing matches his exact cognitive structure. He already thinks in terms of inevitable futures. You're not pitching a preference, you're confirming a trajectory that he already senses. Third, when he pushes back on a specific detail, and he will push back, do not yield immediately and do not defend yourself. Push back on the product logic and argue the execution, not your reasoning. If he's wrong about a mechanic, tell him he's wrong about the mechanic and show him why the current approach achieves the outcome better. Your instinct might tell you to concede to a difficult negotiator, and this instinct is dead wrong. Jobs described his best collaborators as rocks that grind against each other. Yielding on the first push signals fragility, while holding on the substance signals you're an operator worth listening to. The permanent posture you must hold underneath all of this is this. Operate as though the product is the only entity in the room that matters, not your reputation, not his ego, not the social dynamic. If you can maintain that frame, you are no longer a subordinate seeking approval. You become a peer evaluating a shared standard. That shift changes everything about how the interaction resolves. Now, the tactics I just gave you are specific to the Steve Jobs behavioral architecture, but if you run this exact playbook on someone with a different psychological profile, you'll trigger the exact resistance you're trying to avoid. The link in the description takes you to the Strata Intel website. Submit a target, your boss, your client, someone you need to decode before a high-stakes interaction. We extract their exact behavioral fingerprint and deliver a full tactical dossier within 48 hours. At the very least, start with the free brief if you haven't already, 4 baseline archetypes, and immediate delivery. Stop operating blind.